Vikings! Well, I mean, they certainly wouldn't have called themselves Vikings back in the day, given the fact that they were a complex and intricate civilization that went by many different names, ruled by warring families and many different ancient lines of kings and queens. But the Nordic history of Scandinavia is certainly a period in the annals of myth and legend that are worthy of note. The thing is, though, the Vikings weren't just a horde of ravenous warrior berserkers, but instead a complex and mysterious civilization who relied just as much on the mysticism of the otherworldly as they did on the sharpness of their axe. So, let's take a look at some of them, shall we? Hello horror fans, what's going on? And once again, welcome back to the Scariest channel on YouTube, top 5 scary videos. As per usual, I'll be your horror host Jack Finch. Today, we're curious to take a look at the top 5 scariest stories from ancient Nordic history. Roll the clip.
In the name of Odin, and in the name of my fellow gods, I sacrifice you to cleanse this kingdom of its evil spirits!
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Calm down a little there, Ivar. You've got the wrong shield maiden. For the curious amongst you though, of course that clip was from the absolutely fantastic History Channel series Vikings, which details the legendary life of Ragnar Lothbrok and the many sons that follow him: Bjorn Ironside, Ivar the Boneless, Sigurd Snake in the Eye. You get the picture. The point is, not only is that series absolutely brilliant, it also details one of the most important periods of the Viking Age, a time where history was as much fact as it was fiction. So keep that in mind throughout this series. The Vikings were brilliant at spinning a worthy yarn. Kicking off at number 5. Vinland. And no, not the Scandinavian nation of Finland, although that awesome country has as much deeply seated history as the best of them. This story is about a much more different destination. You see, the Vikings were remarkable explorers, and the art of experiencing the unknown parts of the planet was perhaps one of the most important figures in Viking society. So then, it would make sense that the Vikings managed to make landfall in North America nearly 500 years before Christopher Columbus was even born, right? In fact, it is widely considered that the legendary Viking explorer Leif Erikson led the first ever European voyage to touch North American soil. You see, by the year 985 AD, Greenland had been relatively settled by Leif's father, Eric the Red, who had been banished from Norway for committing manslaughter. Leif grew up with a thirst for exploration, and it was around 1000 AD that he turned his sights towards the mystery of the West. After crossing the rest of the Atlantic, he discovered what is now Canada, a rocky and barren land which could have been Baffin Island, but the Vikings dubbed it Helluland, Norwegian for stone slab land. Eventually, when they got further inland, they discovered a much more lush and bountiful region filled with salmon and wild grapes that they named VINLAND, Wineland. They spent a winter or so here before returning home, telling everyone how awesome it was. Now, because of that, several parties tried to sail there and settle permanently, the most famous of which being a site at the northernmost tip of Newfoundland at L'Anse aux Meadows, where archaeologists have discovered numerous evidence of their settlement. You see, after all of this exploration, though, the Vikings hadn't paid much attention to the natives that had lived there for thousands of years already. First, Leif's brother Thorwald Eriksson was killed in a skirmish with a nearby native tribe, and then several years later, another group of Vikings were mercilessly killed in the Battle of Vinland in the year 1010. As an old legend goes, the final nail in the coffin for the Vikings' time in North America came when a small group of fishermen woke up in their coastal camp, only to find that their leader had been beheaded in the night by the natives, his head skewered on a stake as a warning never to return. Swinging in at number 4, the death of HADINGUS. Now, whilst there are many legendary Danish kings from history, the majority of them are renowned for their lives as bloodthirsty warriors and daring tacticians. HADINGUS, though, this guy is far more renowned for his death, more so than anything else. Although, to give him credit, he was a pretty legendary warrior and leader either way. It's just that, well, you'll find out. From the off, HADINGUS was thrust into a life of violent circumstance. His father, King Gram of Denmark, rocked up to the wedding of a Finnish princess, Signe, and her intended husband, Henry, King of Saxony. Obviously, it was love at first sight, as Gram killed Henry on the spot and then took Signe back to Denmark, where she eventually gave birth to their son, HADINGUS. Obviously, Gram had quite a few enemies at this point and was quickly killed in turn, but HADINGUS was smuggled out in secret to Sweden, where he was fostered by a giant, Wagnofthus, and his daughter, Harthgreppa. Now, this is where the story turns up a notch. You see, all HADINGUS wanted to be was a warrior, but the giant Harthgreppa had other desires. Despite being his wet nurse, she eventually seduced him in his adolescence and became his lover. When he came of age, HADINGUS decided to head back to Denmark, and the giantess, of course, came with him. On the way, they spent a night in a house whose inhabitants had just died, but as Harthgreppa was a sorceress, she cast a spell that caused one of the corpses to speak. Wow, Well, that corpse wasn't too happy and cursed them for eternity, telling them both how they would die. Not long afterward, Hearthgrepa's death came true. She was torn to pieces by her fellow giants in a bloodthirsty frenzy. HADINGUS went on in silence though and became the legendary king that he was worthy of being. His death he kept secret, seeking wisdom from his new patron, Odin. Eventually, after partaking in some mythical acts and winning countless wars until his old age, he brought his subjects to a forest to witness his new revelation. He claimed that only Odin knew his death, and then he hung himself in front of everyone. Next up at number 3, the curse of Andvari's ring. And for this one we're going to dip a little into Norse mythology because let's face it, the history of the Scandinavian people was shaped by the skaldic tales that they formed their culture upon. And what if I also told you that the curse of Andvari's ring is also one of the many inspirations of none other than J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. Yeah, cursed ring, Lord of the Rings. Alright, okay, maybe you saw that one coming. But still, in the original legend, one that is scarcely told but is integral to the Volsunga saga, the story focuses on the eponymous ring Andvaranut, or Andvari's gift, a fabled item that had the ability to make gold. Its creator, Andvari, which is Old Norse for careful one, was a dwarf that lived beneath a waterfall who had the primal power to transform himself into a fish at will. Using the power of the ring, Andvari stockpiled great wealth, but it drew the jealousy of the trickster god himself, Loki. You see, being the resourceful type that he was, Loki used a charm net to capture Andvari whilst he was transformed in a fish, and on condition of letting him go, he demanded the ring and his hoard of gold with it. You see, whilst Andvari reluctantly agreed, he also cursed the ring so that misfortune and peril would befall whosoever possessed it. And that's where the real bulk of this tale begins, because as so far as misfortune goes in Norse mythology, Andvari's ring is chasing the heels of Ragnarok in terms of individuals affected. First, Loki passed on the cursed ring to Hreimdar, king of the dwarves, for accidentally killing his son when he was transformed into an otter. Yeah, dwarves and transforming into animals is a pretty key motif here. Hreimdar was quickly hit by misfortune though when his own son, Fafnir, killed him and stole the ring, where he fled to the mountains, transformed into a fiery and fearsome dragon to protect his hoard of gold. Where have we heard that one before? Fafnir didn't last long though, because soon enough the great hero Sigurd hunted down and killed Fafnir the dragon, taking his ring with him, who he gave to his beloved Brynhilda, the shield maiden, and Valkyrie, where the both of them spent years befallen with tragedy after tragedy. Eventually, Queen Grimhild of the dwarves tricked the couple into marrying into her own family, therefore bringing the curse of the ring full circle. Yeah, exactly. Rock and pool is nice and cool, our only wish to catch a fish. Makes a bit more sense now, right? Coming in at number 2, Lindisfarne. Alright, okay, less mythology now and more actual historic atrocity. Lindisfarne in many ways is perhaps the most important date on the Viking calendar. In more ways than one, it was the birth of the Viking Age. It was the precursor to the many times that these Danish, Norwegian and Swedish warriors would step foot on the shores of Britain, or, well, not quite Britain just yet. Not the mainland anyway. You see, the holy island of Lindisfarne is a tidal island just off of the northeast coast of England in Northumberland. Here it was the site of an incredibly important church in pagan Christianity. It was a peaceful and quiet place dedicated to the production of scripture by its humble monastery. In the year 793 it was said that several months before, foreboding omens came over the land of Northumbria. Whirlwinds far at sea, lightning cracking from beyond the waves, and fiery dragons seen flying in the sky. These signs were followed by a great famine, and then on the 8th of June the Vikings emerged from the mist. As a Northumbrian scholar of Charlemagne's court wrote, "Never before has such terror appeared in Britain as we have now suffered from a pagan race. The heathens poured out the blood of saints around the altar and trampled on the bodies of saints in the temple of God, like dung in the streets." You see, the English didn't know what had hit them. The Vikings had perfected the art of shipbuilding and navigation, and they had sailed to a land that they suspected would be filled with riches and resources ripe for the picking. And when they first emerged at Lindisfarne, where the only opposition was holy men in robes, it was like a hot knife through butter. The massacre at Lindisfarne was unprecedented, and in many ways it had only served to further the Vikings' bloody reputation for centuries to come. It sent shockwaves to the rest of Europe, but as history teaches us, that wasn't the last of it. The slaughter at Lindisfarne ushered in a newfound frequency of Viking raids across the coast, as well as in Ireland and France, carving out a brand new period in Britain's bloody history. And finally, coming in at a number 1 spot, The Blood Eagle. Alright, talking of bloody history, our final entry on this list has to be perhaps the most notorious claim in Viking history. Throughout the many sagas of the Viking Age, one term struck more fear into the hearts of those that opposed the Danelaw than anything else. Now, it's also important to note that the so-called Blood Eagle, much like with many things of Norse legend, is possibly as much a fact as it is in fiction. In fact, many historians regard this particular torture method as being so bloodthirsty and grisly that it probably never even happened, but was instead used as a cultural myth to strike fear into the hearts of the Vikings' enemies. I mean, that's also not to say that there are several historical accounts, because there are, but yeah, just take this one with a pinch of salt. As the saga of Ragnar Lothbrok explains, Jarl Ynar went to Halfdan and carved Blood Eagle on his back. He thrust a sword into his trunk by the backbone and cut all the ribs away, from the backbone down to the loins, and drew the lungs out there. Yeah, that's a pretty bold statement. You see, one of the earliest accounts of the use of the Blood Eagle is attributed to the death of Ragnar Lothbrok himself. Back in 865, King Jarl, who was the then king of Northumbria, had finally captured the legendary Viking leader Ragnar Lothbrok and sentenced him to death by throwing him into a pit of deadly snakes. And before anyone says that the United Kingdom doesn't have any deadly snakes, yes we do. It's the adder, and they're incredibly poisonous. Anyway, in revenge for his death, the sons of Ragnar, led by Ivar the Boneless, led a Viking invasion a year or so later with King Jarl in their sights. And once they finally found him following the Battle of York in 867, Viking legend maintains that Jarl was tortured to death by each of Ragnar's sons by method of the Blood Eagle, where he was kept alive during the grisly and bloodthirsty punishment. You see, whether true or not, Jarl was not the only one to have allegedly succumbed to the Blood Eagle, as many other figures throughout the sagas met the same grim fate. Either it was the most painful and vile punishment imaginable, or it was the scariest story ever told in ancient Nordic history. Either way, it worked. Well, there we have it, horror fans, our list for the top 5 scary stories from ancient Nordic history. What do you guys think? Do you agree, disagree? Have any more to add to this list? Then let us know your thoughts down in the comment section below, as well as any choice picks of your own. Before we depart from today's video though, let's first take a quick look at some of your more creative comments from over the past few days. Ambrose Morningstar says, until Jack, aka 2Coach Jack, reveals himself as the leader of his own secret organisation with Lucy, I will not stop watching these videos. He'll slip up eventually. Keep up the good work though. Hey Ambrose, thank you very much for the dedication, but I'm afraid you're going to have to never stop watching these videos. I'm far too unorganised to ever be in an organisation, never mind to lead one. Honestly. Well, on that mysterious note, unfortunately that's all we've got time for in today's video. Just stick around all the way until the end. If you were a fan of this video, or just top 5 scary videos in general, then please be a dear and hit that thumbs up button, as well as that subscribe bell, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. As per usual, I've been your horror host Jack Finch. You've been watching top 5 scary videos, and until next time, you take it easy.